Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, Red Circle, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Also, the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn the notifications on. Also, check us out on Off the Floor. That's text directly to your phone from Brady, Alex, Greg, and me. Bypass Twitter, X, whatever it's called these days. Get Q&As, special contests. We run Prize Picks promo contests there all the time, as long as you're subscribed with the code 5. And also, we give you inside information, and we've given you some inside information that actually kind of led to this episode. So we're going to talk about that as we go forward here. So check us out at winnow.app. That's winno.app/ Off the Floor. Also, check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network. I mentioned Prize Picks. Use that code 5, F-I-V-E. Get that initial deposit matched up to $100. You can play the FIBA World Cup there. We're going to be doing a lot of that stuff on playback, so check us out on playback. You can watch those games with us. Watch Eric Spoelstra coach, one of the things that you can do during FIBA, but you can also play Prize Picks. You can also, of course, play MLB, NFL preseason, NFL futures, esports, wrestling, MMA, boxing, it's all there. Go to prizepicks.com. Use that code 5, F-I-V-E, to get that initial deposit matched up to $100. Now, today's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yikes. 5 on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing rubber frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing. Got it all banned. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat, we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the Five Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I've got Greg Sylvander. You can follow him at Greg Sylvander. I've got Brady Hawk. You can follow him at Brady Hawk 305. Check out the episode that I just did with Alex Toledo. He and I got into Team USA. Had a little bit of fun speculating on who on the Team USA roster may end up with the Miami Heat. So listen to that. We know that the Heat have used Team USA situations as kind of recruiting grounds. Sometimes they weren't even realizing they were doing it because, of course, Dwayne, LeBron, and Chris Bosh decided to come together on the back of a bus. I believe it was 2008. And then you look forward a little bit, and Dame and Bam established a relationship, which is now leading to today's episode. And now Eric Spoelstra is the assistant coach, as I mentioned, of Team USA. But we're going to talk Dame today. And as we've done, it seems like 50 times since the trade demand was made, about 53 days ago, I think, as we're speaking here. And we're actually going to expand on a topic that we touched on a couple of weeks ago, which was we raised the possibility of the Heat keeping Tyler Herro, but still acquiring Dame Lillard. It didn't get a lot of attention when we did it here on the podcast and on Off the Floor, but now today it's getting more attention. There was a report in Clutch Points that the Heat are attempting to figure out a way to do this where they can keep Tyler and still get Dame. And then it led to a bunch of speculation, of course, on Heat Twitter about what that may look like. And Greg, I just want to go back to the beginning here before we go forward onto what is the preferred course of action. Can you go back to give, because we're looking at 2-3 weeks ago now, where you gave a possible path. We devoted an episode to this of how they could get Tyler. We didn't say this is what they were necessarily doing, but how they could keep Tyler and still get Dame.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is the fun part about the offseason, right? Is that the longer that we go, the more speculative stuff comes up. And that's really what we were doing based off of mathematics. I mean, when you look at the cap, when you look at the tradable salaries, and you look at the fact that Duncan Robinson is, due a hefty amount. Kyle Lowry has a large expiring contract. Caleb Martin is, a $6.8 million deal that is easily slotted in certain situations. There's just a lot of ways for the Heat to make the money work, quote unquote. So that's like the easy part of it. I think the larger issues, and it's stuff we talked about back on our episode, were, is it feasible to actually pull it off? How would it work on the court? Can you actually field? And I think this is what we're going to talk about now. A group around players that would be that high of a salary at the top of the roster. So there's lots of question marks. Would Portland even want to do a deal where either the draft capital that is associated with Tyler Herro or Tyler Herro himself wasn't coming. I don't know. Obviously, we know that they're lukewarm on Tyler Herro. Still doesn't make sense to me. Just collect good young players, but they're the Trailblazers. So I don't know that it's really something we should get fixated on as a fan base, as analysts, etc. It's something that popped up in the headlines, and technically by math, it absolutely is possible.
And the one thing we know is that Tyler Herro would like it. We know he wants to be here.
For sure.
Going to Miami Pro League, nothing's changed in that regard. I think some of the bitterness that people thought was going to be the case after his name has been out there in trade talks, it doesn't seem like that's what's actually happened here. And I've mentioned on the podcast many times that I actually think that's helped the Heat in their leverage, because I think one of the things that Portland is betting on is it's going to be at least as much of a circus in Miami, if not more, than it is in Portland. And I've always said the only way it was a circus was if Tyler Herro makes it one, because I don't really think that Kyle Lowry is going to do that. Let's be honest. Kyle's at the end of a career collecting a check at this stage. I don't really think, and if he gets traded somewhere else, he's likely going to get bought out if it's a team like Portland or something like that. And he'll end up in a place like Philadelphia or some other contender or place close to home that makes sense for him. I don't think that's an issue. And Duncan Robinson, who's been out there in all these trade talks, that's been the case for him for 3 years. It's really Tyler, who's a 23-year-old, still ascending player who still wants to prove something, who just got a sizable contract from the Heat. And how is he going to take, essentially being discarded in a trade like this? And it seems like he's at least channeling it the right way. And I do think that that helps Miami in all this. But Brady, as we go to this, it kind of becomes a choice. It seems like, okay, there's a lot of variables here, but it kind of seems like a choice of keeping Tyler Herro or keeping potentially Jovic and Martin. Is that a fair way to characterize this? Because it feels like Jaquez goes regardless. And I know we just did an episode where I said I'd rather move Jaquez than Jovic, and I think Greg and I agree on that. But does it feel that way? First, before we go to Brady, Greg, does it feel like that it is kind of like, because I want to get his view on which he would prefer. Does it feel like it's Herro or Martin and Jovic?
In this completely hypothetical or theoretical, I don't know what kind of theoretical situation it is. Yes, I would. It basically, this is a situation where the Heat can match straight up for Dame with Lowry and Duncan Robinson, if we're going straight to the money. So then you're talking about what else are you adding to that? Because that obviously is not a fair trade. So it's about what can they drum up around those two guys where the money already works and make that worthy. And so that's where we're making the leap as a show to say that it would probably take Caleb Martin, Nikola Jovic, Jaime Jaquez, and all the available draft picks necessary. And maybe they've been freeing up a pick with Oklahoma City, like that was kind of floated around on social media today. Maybe Caleb Martin ends up in a place like Oklahoma City to free up the necessary draft capital, etc. So, that does appear to be like what the theory would be, is like, that's how you keep Tyler out of the deal, is to send basically everything else you have along with these expirings. And that would just mean that Portland had lost even more leverage. And so we'll see what happens, but yes, that's the theory.
All right. So Brady, let's throw out that theory. Would you rather have Tyler Herro going into next season, or would you rather have Caleb Martin and Nikola Jovic?
If there's any scenario where you can get Damian Lillard and keep Tyler Herro, I'm keeping Tyler Herro. Like, I don't think that other scenario, I'm looking into it that much. Like, yes, we have to consider it just because we've talked a whole bunch about like the Jovic ascension and the Caleb's impact and all of that. But if you're cashing in your chips right now to go get Damian Lillard, try to win right now, you keep Tyler Herro because he gives you the best chance to win right now, in my opinion. So like, I feel like when I've seen this whole conversation, I feel like we're overthinking it a lot in terms of on the court, where it's like, I've heard the backcourt is too bad defensively. Miami had Kendrick Nunn and Duncan Robinson in their backcourt. Like, I think they could be okay with Damian Lillard and Tyler Herro. Like, we're like really overthinking that for one perspective. I've seen other stuff about maybe Tyler coming off the bench. We could cross that bridge when we get there. If we want to have that conversation, that ends up happening and Tyler accepts it, cool. If he doesn't, cool as well. But it doesn't matter. You have, at this point, it's like trying to acquire talent on the roster, and you're giving Spoelstra, Damian Lillard, Tyler Herro, Jimmy, and Bam in this hypothetical world to work with. Like, yeah, I'm doing that. And there's enough rotation guys on the back end to kind of deal with it. It would be tough to kind of see a guy like Jovic go and a guy like Hawkins go, specifically Jovic, I think just because of all the stuff we're seeing right now with the way he's been playing and all that stuff, and you're talking about his ceiling and all of that. But still, you have to kind of put into perspective the fact that this is a win now situation. I think Tyler makes the most sense. And I know Greg is going to give the flip side of this, which is partly about the financial aspect, which I think is an interesting part of it. But I'm not talking about the money side of things right now. I'm talking about the basketball side of things. Like, y'all can figure. I'm not the one figuring out the money stuff. Everybody else can figure out the money stuff when we cross that bridge. You keep Tyler Herro if you can keep Tyler Herro.
Greg, take the other side, please, because I'm gonna unbreak this tie. If you take the other side, go ahead.
So I understand where y'all are going. This is just where I'm coming from. One, I don't want to get people's hopes up too much. Like, that's first off, because I get accused constantly 100%. Of being the hope trafficker that is saying that the Heat are going to do all kinds of crazy things because of my faith in Riley and Andy. And so I'm trying to, one, be realistic, but two, I can make a little bit of an argument that Caleb Martin next season would be more instrumental and impactful to Jimmy, Bam, and Dame as a prototype, his skill set, than Tyler Herro, frankly. Like, straight up, I think that Herro is overkill to what Dame brings, whereas Caleb Martin provides a lot of other stuff that they don't get from anyone else on that team. You're really putting a ton on Jimmy and Bam defensively to be available to keep that defense afloat. It's not just about being great in the postseason at that point. So I don't know. It's not as much about any of the other young players. I think that on the court, it would be closer than we expect. And this is where I veer in the other direction. The financial commitment to carry a top heavy roster where you're going to spend seasons with two guys making over 50 million and another two guys making over 30, 40 million, approaching 40 million in Bam Adebayo's case and over 30 million in Tyler's case, it's going to get punitive. You're not going to have the necessary mid-level exceptions. You're going to have to be playing above the second apron and all of those punitive things, which we've talked about on other episodes. I'm not going to bore people. I just think it's a tough ask. If any org can pull it off, y'all know it's the culture that can make it work. But I just think when I look at the building around that team going forward, whether they re-sign Caleb or not, that would, I guess, be a major factor in this conversation. So we're having to go hypotheticals now. But I'm not as quick to jump on that it's that much of a slam dunk.
Can I just counter with the Caleb point? Like, in that scenario, you're keeping Haywood Highsmith and Josh Richardson. So like, I feel like in that perspective, you can fill some of the stuff he's done, just like with the defensive aspect and maybe some of that. So I think in terms of that, like, if hypothetically, let's just go through what a roster could potentially look like with Tyler. If it's, let's say it's Dame, Tyler, Jimmy, Highsmith, Bam, Josh Richardson, Kevin Love, Thomas Bryant, and then obviously you're going to fill it and find a buyout.
Christian Wood and Kelly Oubre.
Well, there you go. That we're going to tee up our probably next episode. But that's what you're dealing with. Like, I feel like you can fill. I think I'll just say it's easier to fill Caleb than it is Tyler, in my opinion. Like, Tyler is that dynamic that I think it's harder to fill what he provides.
We're gonna go to break, because I'm going to do something afterwards that most people don't expect me to do typically. I do want to mention a couple great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Our betting partner is Better Edge. Use the code 5RSN. Get $20 to play. You're betting against others who use it. You're not betting against the app itself, and it's based in Minneapolis, not in Costa Rica. That's why it's legal. Go to betteredge.com, find the line that you want, and again, use the code 5RSN. Get $20 to play. Also, if you have any kind of damage in your house, leaks, water, mold, any of that stuff, reach out to our friends at Water Cleanup of Florida, based right there in Boca Raton, but they service all of South Florida. Heck, they service Southwest Florida too. They're always on the other coast helping out people in Fort Myers. They did so after the hurricane. Reach out to Michael Robert and his team, Water Cleanup of Florida. They've got more than 70 5-star reviews on Google. They also have a preventative maintenance program, because that after something happens, the insurance companies don't want to help you. So why don't you head it off? Okay. Go to WCUFL.com, WCUFL.com. Learn more about their customizable maintenance tips and service plan and annual inspections, hurricane priority service, air quality testing, and more. So reach out to them, WCUFL.com, Water Cleanup of Florida, or on Michael's personal cell, 954-579-0356, 954-579-0356. Water cleanup in Florida. If you've got the schmutz,
they got the guts.
All right, here's where I'm going with this. Okay. To me, this is not even close. And I don't typically, that's why I want to do this episode, because honestly, Greg and I don't disagree on a lot much. And I don't feel like you feel strongly about this one, actually.
No, of course not.
But you absolutely keep Tyler Herro. Like, I don't think there's any question here. And I'll go through some of the reasons, but I'll start here. He's the best player. He's the best player. And he's 23 years old. And look, I know people know how I feel about Caleb and how I felt about Caleb from the beginning, but Tyler Herro is the best player we are talking about. Nikola Jovic has a great future ahead of him. Just did a whole episode. Keep him instead of Jaquez, right? But it's theoretical. Like, we don't know yet. Like, we haven't seen him on the court in high leverage situations. Now, we have seen Tyler, and I know people are going to come back at me and say, well, the playoffs a year ago, even I'm talking about the previous postseason, were not very good. Even before he got hurt, we don't know what he would have done this postseason. I am not going to blame him for diving for a loose ball, but he had 12 points when he came out in that series, and I think we all think he was going to have a strong series based on the way that they were going to play him and the way he was driven to succeed there. But we saw it. Look, we saw it in the bubble. Okay. We've seen it in high leverage situations in big regular season games that Tyler has come through. And I've even made the point that a lot of his numbers come when they lose. Okay. And it's a chicken or the egg type theory. And I know he doesn't love that I brought up that stat so much, but he's the best player we're talking about. You're trying to win a championship now in Jimmy's window. And the equation changes. Like, I understand saying you swap out Tyler to get Dame to win in Jimmy's window. I get that. That's what we're talking about. But then you have to make the case then that if you can keep a guy like Tyler Herro as your fourth best player, as your third scorer, to take the burden off of Bam to really have to do any of that. Could you imagine how good Bam's going to be if he's out there with Jimmy, Dame, and Tyler as offensive players, with the relationship, the cohesion he has with Tyler already, the friendship he's got with Dame? And we know it's clunky at times, but having played with Jimmy for this many years, that literally, like, you could just say to Bam, just defend everything. We'll run some stuff with you at the top and go get dunks. Okay, like, a lot of the pressure that we've been putting on Bam that he's had to put on himself goes away if you have a third scorer, or in some cases, Tyler may end up being the second scorer, of that quality, of that level of efficiency, who is a potential 37 to 40% three-point shooter, who has a mid-range game, who has gotten much better at making reads. And the defensive stuff, I like Brady said, they have started worse defenders. Kyle Lowry is not an elite defender at this stage in the backcourt. Okay. He doesn't guard anybody at the point of attack. They have to switch everything. So I'm not really that concerned about Dame and Tyler together. Again, if you're putting three good defenders with them, and as you mentioned, Haywood Highsmith is still here and Josh Richardson is still here, and they can play some with Josh at the 3 and Jimmy at the 4. And they can also play some with Haywood at the 4, and they can switch all that stuff out. But to me, the Josh Richardson signing protected you in a scenario like this. And we talked about it at the time, that if they had to move Caleb Martin because they didn't want to move somebody else, or because that's what it required, they have the ability to do that because they have a player who can do some of the same things that Caleb can do at a much cheaper price point. And the one other thing on this, okay, if Caleb Martin was signed at this number for the next 3 years, I would say, okay, but this team's going to get expensive anyway. Because if you have to pay, not this season, but if you what are you going to be paying Caleb with the numbers the way they've gone up? Tyler's contract is going to look reasonable in a year. It looks reasonable now.
I think that the argument people are going to make is, like, let's just say Caleb walks because he's too expensive too, because Tyler is also too expensive as well because of how punitive it is. So, like, if you're just building, let's just talk about the three guys, and we're not even talking about the rest. You'd have no mid-level exception ever. Your draft capital is already completely gone. So you're not hitting on picks. You don't have any picks. So it's essentially, you're doing what the Heat do. So, like, obviously I'm the one who peddles this loudest, that, like, yeah, the Heat they're the ones that can navigate this. They'll show the rest of the league how to do it correctly. And, like, it'll then become the new blueprint around the league to do it, because it's like the one org that could probably, game the
Simon in the
system
lab.
to a degree, but it would take a financial commitment, Ethan. And I know that I guess Dame requires
I don't want to
that
hear
anyway.
it on that. I don't want to hear it on that. And this is why I'm a little surprised you're taking that side of it, because I know you don't want to hear it on that.
Oh,
I don't want to.
I don't.
I don't want to hear about the financial commitment anymore. I don't. If you are going for it, look, if you have a middling team, I understand not wanting to spend into the tax and not wanting to go into the second apron and all that. If you have a team and you've committed to Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and Dame Lillard to start, there should be no expense spared, because there's so many financial benefits to that team. And it's not just having deep playoff runs, which obviously bring more money into the owner's coffers, because we know you make more money the more home playoff games that you have. Okay. It's not the bubble. All right. You're going to be right here in your arena. But beyond that, it's franchise value. It's which is the one thing about owners that's never talked about, is the franchise value and how it accelerates. Okay. When brand value and all of those kind of things, you are talking about a team. If you have Jimmy, Bam, Dame, and Tyler with his flair and his improvement
timelines, I know
it becomes the biggest show in the sport, I think. Okay. And I obviously ESPN is going to be reluctant to cover it that way, but I'm just saying you are talking about something that's not quite big three-ish, but it's as close as you're going to get. Okay. That any franchise could have. So I'm not that to me. And the issue about, the issue about not having mid-levels and all that, and you agree with this, there is no organization better at leveraging underpriced talent than the Miami Heat. So essentially, you're putting the burden on Adam Simon to continue to find these guys, Eric Spoelstra to continue to develop these guys, and Andy Ellisberg to continue to give them these team-friendly 3-year contracts to keep them in the fold, and that you're going to have a running pipeline of this. That's how that is the inefficiency in the market that they've hit. If you watch Moneyball, okay, and I'd never worked for the Oakland A's. They never won a World Series, but Billy Beane always said, well, because when you get to the playoffs, it's totally variable. You can't control it. You got one hot pitcher, whatever. But they exploited market inefficiencies. The market inefficiency that the Miami Heat have exploited is they find guys, and Brady and I just did a whole episode on this, and I'm probably 2 guys we talked about are going to end up getting big contracts in 3 years.
You're right.
Okay. Where we do the same thing with all these guys. We get excited about them at first a little bit. They got one skill, but they're unpolished in other areas. Then the Heat give them more responsibility in the second summer league. Then they get into the rotation. Then they play a little bit in high leverage situations. And then they end up getting $63 million like Max Strus got or whatever. They're going to find 2 more of those guys. So if you can keep finding those guys, I don't care about the mid-level exception, because you're competing. I mean, and again, there's always going to be a Christian Wood or a Kelly Oubre who does not get what they were supposed to get because other teams thought that they were either uncoachable or wouldn't fit in a system. And Eric Spoelstra is going to look at him and say, give him to me. Give him to me. So, and he has the conversation with him and says, let me rebuild your value. Okay. Like doing with Josh Richardson now, and like they're probably going to do with either Oubre or Wood. So they are perfectly positioned to do this. And my thing is, like, you're talking about a 23-year-old Tyler Herro and a 28-year-old, right? Caleb Martin, where Tyler is signed for the next 3 years, and Caleb is really only signed for 1. I don't think there's any. I mean, I hate giving up Jovic, but you got to give up something here. But Brady, I mean, let's just go to the basketball part of this, okay? Tyler Herro in a 3-man backcourt, which is essentially what it would be. Tyler Herro, Dame Lillard, and Josh Richardson. To me, that's the best backcourt in basketball.
100%. I mean, you could throw, let's say in the starting lineup, if Jimmy's at the 3, like, talk about Jimmy being able to take off a regular season. Like, he literally could sit 60 games probably, and they could still probably have a decent record like that.
That's valid.
They could do certain stuff there where it's like, it's just tough to deal with as an opposing defense. Like, I don't really know how you can, you have 2 guys that are not only very top level pick and roll players, but both of them are high level shooters. Both of them are just in the 3-point contest. Like, both of them are like high level spot up guys that could do certain stuff that you can move things around with. And then I talked before about, like, when Dame passes half court, players have to pick him up, and all of a sudden, like, a Bam in that scenario would have so many open lanes. Add Tyler into that equation. Like, that's why in the previous podcast, I've talked so much about having Duncan, why I think it's so important, just because I think Duncan it's tough to deal with if you have Duncan and Dame in a potential roster. You're talking about Tyler Herro now, who has gravity not only behind the 3-point line, but everywhere else on the court. Like, I just don't know that is Spoelstra heaven. Like, give Spoelstra, you just talk about, like, give him to me, like, these low-level, like, undrafted guys and minimum players like Christian Wood and Oubre. Give him 4 high-level talents that we're talking about right now, and it is tough to bet against that, especially what we've seen the last few years. So from a basketball perspective,
you also have role definition, which is the other thing, because you have 4 guys, but you have role definition because they will operate in different places on the floor. Am I wrong? I mean, am I jumping out too much on a limb there? Because I feel like people are going to throw like Steph and Clay at me and others. But I mean, where would this rank as a backcourt? I mean, Harden and Maxey, we can't even count it anymore. I don't know where Harden's going to be, but I'm just trying to think of the best guards in the league and who they play with. Like,
I think you're pretty damn close because Steph and Clay is just iconic. And so, like, yeah, they were going to get a pass on all these conversations. But, like, functionally, if you think about the third guy there, I think that's still a little – we're going to find out what that looks like.
Well, they don't have Jordan Poole anymore, right?
Correct. So that's what I mean. So it's like
that's part of it. I'm just thinking top of my head here.
Booker and Beal, I guess, could be in that.
Yeah, but there's no point guard there. That's if I was to say to you, okay, now most people are going to say, okay, it's Booker and Beal, right? But at least with Dame and Tyler, like, there will be some role definition there. Like, and I don't know what the Booker Beal thing's going to look like. Like, the idea that they're going to make Beal the point guard or handle doesn't make sense to me because Booker did it before and was pretty good at it. So I don't really get that. But I'm just looking around. I'm thinking, well, the Clippers know, the Lakers know. I mean, who has? I mean, the Eastern Conference, Toronto, the Nets.
Maybe Cleveland, if you say Garland and Mitchell.
Garland and Mitchell, right, would be be up there.
That's definitely on the radar. I bet you that Knicks fans will throw Jalen Brunson and they'll get Josh Hart in their backcourt somehow right. And another guy and try to get them in the mix. But I'm not buying it, to your point.
I mean, Max is the third guard in Cleveland, right? Or he's probably going to be the starting 3, most likely. But yeah, I mean, you were talking about who doesn't want an elite level backcourt, and then you're plugging in a guy in Josh who can really play both spots. You can go offense, defense with Tyler and Josh at the end of games if you need to, although I think they both be on the floor in a lot of those situations. And because you don't have Caleb, obviously. Look, with the Caleb thing, if you told me to put money on it, I would tell you that Caleb Martin is probably not here beyond next season anyway.
I agree.
So if that's the case,
yeah, I did.
Would you rather have the hero asset?
Listen, I did. Let's just be honest here, and it's in the chat of our show for y'all to hear how the sausage is made. I did a terrible job of the fake disagree on this show. I tried to pull up the other point, but the more that we unpack this, it makes total sense that Tyler is the more secure player because of his long-term contract. But let me just cycle back to this, y'all. Are we now at the place where we're going to say the Heat are going to get a top 75 player and they're not going to give up their best player or their second best player or their third best player? Like, if they pull that off, hats off. Like, it's just going to build the allure of the crap that I go hope trafficking with. So it's beautiful. It sounds really unrealistic, doesn't it?
It sounds like you're betting against yourself, which I understand. But here's the thing. I believe the Heat are going to get this done with a better deal than Heat fans expect. Nothing has happened this summer that leads me to believe the Portland Trailblazers have any more leverage than they did at the beginning. And I continue to make the argument that once Dame gets to camp, they will have less leverage. What are they going to do? Send Dame home? Like, I understand that the NBA it took another shot today at Harden with $100,000 fine. And to me, that's a shot across the bow to Dame again, to just be clear. Don't say you're not going to play for anybody. But it makes no sense for the Portland Trailblazers to have Dame Lillard on the court this season because they are trying to tank. They should be trying to tank. They should be trying to keep that lottery pick. They should get it as high up as they possibly can. Dame Lillard will accidentally win them games. It draws them no benefit. It also strings the fans along, keeps the fans from moving on to the young players. It keeps the young players in question. Is it their team? Is it Dame's team? It's a mess. The Miami Heat, meanwhile, can go to training camp with their Hall of Fame coach, and he will figure this shit out if he doesn't have Dame. We trust Chauncey Billups to figure it out at this point? I don't. Okay, in that whole scenario. So nothing has changed about any of this, except I actually think the Heat have gained more leverage. And I wouldn't be surprised. And I don't know. Look, the reporter reported for Clutch Points. I don't know that reporter. I don't know who he spoke to, but I'll just say this. If I were the Miami Heat, I would be putting it out there that I'd be thinking of ways to keep Tyler Herro and still get Dame. And I would be putting it out there that we may have interest in Joel Embiid someday, because I think you need to put Cronin's feet to the fire and say, we're not waiting for you. We're not going to give you the offer that you want. Bring Dame to camp. Dare us to bring our guys to camp, and we'll see what happens. So I don't think this is as far-fetched as it was 2 weeks ago. I still don't think it's likely that they keep Tyler Herro. I want to be clear on that, and are able to get Dame Lillard. But we saw them get Jimmy Butler for Josh Richardson, a first-round pick, and they were able to dump Hassan Whiteside's contract in the process after they had a deal with Dallas that fell through for Dragic because the name was heard wrong. They still pulled that shit off. I wouldn't put it past him to keep Tyler Herro. I just wouldn't.
Roll. Killing him.
Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Five on the Floor on the Five Regional Sports Network.